Welcome to the Cyber Business Podcast, where we feature top founders and entrepreneurs and share their inspiring stories. Now, let's get started with the show.
Matthew Connor here, host of the Cyber Business Podcast, where we feature successful business leaders, authors, top law firms, green energy companies, and more. Today, we have another great episode in our IT Manager series with the IT Manager of the ARM Group, Christopher Ritchie. Christopher, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
No, thanks for being on. Before we get too far in, a quick word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by cyberlinks.com. That's cyberlynx.com. Do you know if a hacker's in your system? Most people and most companies don't until it's too late and the hacker's already done damage. A hacker's job is to bypass your security, so companies need a way of knowing when someone's gotten past their security. That's where Cyberlink's intrusion detection comes in. With our 24/7 Security Operations Center, we use a combination of AI and cybersecurity technicians to see when a hacker has successfully bypassed your security. So if a bad guy gets past your security, we'll find out right away and be able to kick them out. Find out more at cyberlinks.com. That's cyberlynx.com. And now back to our show. Chris, well, I've already welcomed you to the show and thanked you for coming on. But for those who aren't familiar, can you tell us about the ARM Group and your story?
Sure. As you mentioned, my name is Chris Ritchie, and I'm the IT manager for ARM Group. We're a mid-size engineering firm headquartered in central Pennsylvania, but we have a presence throughout the Mid-Atlantic region of the United States. Most of our offices are in Pennsylvania, but we also have offices in Virginia, Maryland, New Jersey, West Virginia, and expanding on an ongoing basis. One of the things I think that's interesting about our company is we're quite diverse in our practice areas and service line offerings. We offer engineering in geotechnical, civil engineering, a lot of energy engineering, including legacy energy like oil and gas, as well as the up and coming renewable energy like solar, solid waste, environmental engineering. So, and I'm saying this coming from a non engineering background or mentality. Yeah, of course, I guess you could say I'm a network engineer, but outside of that, when we talk about engineering, it's something that I'm always learning about with our company. But I work with a lot of very intelligent people, and I feel very grateful and humbled to be part of an organization that's actually making a difference in the world around us.
That's fantastic. It's funny because I think that perspective of kind of that it's just a bit of gratitude, right? Or like appreciation. And I think all too often people they just don't have it that much, right? And I don't care what you're making. It doesn't really matter what the product or service is. If you have that perspective of you're doing good in the world and you're making the world, so even if you're just flipping hamburgers, you're providing somebody with the food that they need to live. There's something very great in that. And I think you're the first person to have ever come on the show now in what do we have, like, I don't know, 60, 70, 80 episodes, something like that, who's ever even mentioned that. So good for you. I love that. I think that's such a great perspective.
Well, and it's something that I can say I sometimes have to work at. When you have a particular day in IT where things aren't going right, at the end of the day, you have to look back and say, this was a tough one, but I have to realize that I have a lot to be thankful for in the midst of the chaos that you had to walk through on a particular day. So that's important.
Well, I love that because I think, as we're doing this IT Manager series, I think those are lessons that don't get passed down, to the younger people in IT coming up. And it's really easy to get spun up and not appreciate the day, especially when you have those really challenging days. And so I think from a leadership perspective, that's such a valuable lesson. And one of the things that I kind of wanted to focus on and work on with this IT Manager series is kind of putting together those lessons, hearing it from guys like you, those kind of things. So right out the gate, we've got you tee up a home run. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So, well, let me ask you, in terms of your backstory, because I think it'll help other people in IT, or even let's just go with IT, to understand, because you didn't really come from an IT background, right?
No, I did not. And it's interesting that as I kind of reflect on my life and on my career, there's certain things that do come to mind that I think, well, if I had recognized this when I was younger, that I had, a certain affinity or skill set, maybe I could have gotten into IT earlier. But in retrospect, I am also thankful for my previous career, but also it's kind of interesting. So I was kind of the nerdy kid that in seventh, eighth grade, I would be sitting there in English class taking my digital watch apart because I was just fascinated. And so I'm the one that would get in trouble for those kinds of things. And back then, this was back way back in the 80s. So I'm dating myself a little bit. But the IT careers weren't really on the radar screen of most of the people that I went to high school and college with. Um, and IT was really only beginning to come into its own from a business perspective as I was, getting out into the workforce. So I actually went into church youth ministry for several years. And I really enjoyed that. It was something that I really felt that I was helping people, certainly young people. But I got to the point in my career when I realized I'm not sure that I can do this for the next 30, 40 years or whatever. So if that's the case, then what do I do next? And like a lot of people that get either into a rut in their career, or they just they get someplace where they feel stuck and they don't know how to go that next step. That was definitely me about 18, 20 years ago. And one of the things that was interesting during that time is during my last ministry tenure in a church is that I found myself doing about 30 to 40% of my time in technology related things, even though that wasn't officially my job role, whether it be, building a new website for the church, or helping with the AV equipment for a worship service, or just being sort of the go-to person whenever somebody had a technology problem. It began to get the wheels turning in my head. It's like, maybe that's the next step. But even with that realization, the fear was there of knowing, how can I make that jump? I don't have official experience, and yet at the same time, I'm going to need some sort of training, and how do I do that?
Yeah.
And so it was a very confusing time. And I think it's important to realize that anybody that's going through that transition, that you kind of have to live with that confusion for a little bit, because otherwise it doesn't really force you to take that to that next step. And providentially, as something came out of that confusion, that an opportunity came for me to get some very intense Microsoft training at that point, which in the industry at that point, that was really what was needed. And so I realized that, okay, I can buckle down and take a 6 month course and basically get some training under my belt that will enable me to make that step into IT. And so I did that and got a bunch of Microsoft certifications, and then got my first IT job as a help desk analyst. And I think a lot of people that are first getting into IT, one of the things that I have found that can be a hindrance is that they get siloed. And what I mean by that is they get stuck in just one particular area of IT, maybe just answering help desk calls, or maybe just doing software support, or just network support, and not being allowed to do anything else. Thankfully, that wasn't the case for me. I took an IT job at a small mortgage company, and the CIO at that company was very gracious in a lot of ways in letting me kind of cut my teeth and sometimes even make mistakes in a lot of different areas of IT. and I appreciate the opportunity to have that experience, because it wasn't just one area of IT. And so I've always kind of really stressed that as I've developed my career, is trying to find new ways to learn and hone my skill set. So I moved on from there to another company, and one of the things I really enjoyed was kind of really being down in the trenches of IT. And as I looked down the road and said, okay, well, I'm not always going to be doing, help desk, or not always doing operations support. At some point, I'll move into a leadership role. But I decided early on that I never wanted to get into the kind of role where um, I was divorced from the actual uh, getting my hands dirty in terms of helping people. And I've told that to the leadership, even here at Arm Group. I said, "Now, I never want to get to a place in IT where I would never get under a desk and run cable or fix something, because I really do think that within IT leadership you need to have that understanding and that experience of what people are dealing with in terms of technology in order to provide effective leadership. Maybe it's different if you're the CIO of a Fortune 500 company, but I always wanted to avoid that siloing of my IT skills and my IT career. And so I've had the opportunity to work with a few different organizations. I worked with an accounting firm down in Sarasota, Florida for several years. And then I've been here at Arm Group for about 6.5 years now. So,
Well, I can't help but kind of feel a bit of kinship there, because
mhm.
there is something, it's just, there's something really, really rewarding about providing that IT service and that help, right? So when somebody has an issue and they come to you and you fix it, it's rewarding. I mean, it just is. And I think it's one of those things where no 2 days are the same, right?
Yeah,
So
that's
unlike a
definitely.
lot of people where it's like, oh, you know exactly what it, let's say accounting, or for them it's very methodical. They know exactly what tomorrow is going to bring, kind of deal. And
Mhm.
it's payroll is on this day, and they have
Right.
the
Yeah.
processes, and it's very okay. And I'm not knocking that. That is, for some people, that is the dream. They
Mhm.
like the consistency and the structure. And I think for for a lot of IT folks, the fact that you're likely not going to get the same call twice, let
Mhm.
alone have, or the same, it's nice when you get the same problem twice, because then you can
Yeah.
solve that one faster and be like, hey, look how smart he is,
Mhm.
but that doesn't happen all the time. So it's really rewarding. And as you
Mhm.
move up the kind of the ladder there in IT,
Mhm.
staying in touch with the kind of the grassroots of IT, I think that's I think you're spot on there. And I
Yeah.
do think I have to agree. I think it would be a little coming all the way up through IT. I could see missing that those help desk days, the
Mhm.
interacting with with the client, if you will, or the customer, and really helping somebody. But
Mhm.
as you get up to Fortune 500 CIO,
Yeah.
your day's just going to be so busy. How are you?
Yeah, and I think if the path ever opened up for me to go down that road, I probably would find myself in an undercover boss episode, answering help desk calls, or doing something along those lines, just because I would never want to totally get away from it.
Yeah, no, I think I feel the same way. And I think that's kind of the challenge, right? For
Mhm.
for management is how do you, and well, let me ask you, how do you do that currently where you're at the ARM group? How do you stay
Sure.
in touch?
Well, and I'll kind of segue that by talking a little bit about kind of how my role has developed at Arm Group. When I kind of was brought in to Arm Group to primarily be the main IT person here. We did work with a managed services provider. We still do. We've had an ongoing relationship with that company, and they have provided some back end IT support, but the day-to-day stuff we've done in-house.
Nice.
And as I came in, I was responsible for one of basically three companies that were under our umbrella. We had another company that we had acquired, but we really weren't integrated with them from an IT perspective. And then we acquired a second company that had its own part-time IT person. And so my focus was just on my part of the company. But then one of the things that we realized is that in order for us to continue to grow as an enterprise, is for us to move from more of a holding model as a company to more of an enterprise model. And so one of the ways that we did that is we began to develop some of our back end support for the company, and that included, the financial end of things, the HR end of things, and then the third piece of that was for us to have a more unified IT leadership and infrastructure. And so for the last couple of years, we've been moving down that road, and that's been a bit of an adjustment for my role, because I went from being primarily just a network administrator within one company to an IT manager for the entire enterprise. And right now we're a company of headcount close to 300. We're continuing to grow. The company has some pretty stated goals that by 2030 we want to be about a 400 person company, along those lines. So one of the things that we realize is we're going to have to put processes and infrastructure in place that's going to help us meet those goals. And so my role has kind of shifted a little bit from more doing the day-to-day operations support to stepping into much more of a leadership role, where the goal is to begin to help strategize along with the other company leadership. How can we meet those goals as a business in order to get to that 2030 timeline and be who we need to be as a company?
Yeah, no, and I think that's really really important. And it's funny because you'd mentioned how you use, an MSP for outside support in a lot of ways. And I think this is a really interesting topic that I think a lot of companies, even, no matter what size, they have this is always kind of a topic. Does it make more sense for us to bring in some outside help on this, or do we hire internally for it?
Mhm.
And so, for you guys, let's see, you said you're in 3 or 4 different locations,
Yes.
right? So you've got multiple locations. If you hire an IT person at each location, okay, you got somebody on site if
Mhm.
that happens, right? But if you outsource some of the MS, to an MSP, a managed service
Mhm.
provider, for some of those things, well, now maybe you get the same benefit at, a less cost without having to hire somebody there if the needs aren't high enough. And then, not to mention what happens on the cybersecurity side when you're talking about how do you have a 24/7, security operations center. I mean, that's just 24/7. Anything is
Mhm.
expensive because just the manpower, let alone the expertise. And so, yeah, I think that's something that a lot of small businesses are, we have clients who, I think, as small as, say in the 40, 50,
Mhm.
employee range, are, they're always contemplating, well, at what point do we hire our first, in-house IT, right?
Mhm.
And that's probably a close enough space, somewhere in that 50 to
Mhm.
100. It just depends on their day-to-day needs.
Yeah.
So it's it's such an interesting topic, at least for me, because we run
Mhm.
a managed service provider
Sure.
and a cybersecurity company. So I think it's always a relevant topic. But it's interesting to hear from somebody, on your side, where you've got
Mhm.
both and you're doing kind of that co-managed thing. So how do you guys break up your co-managed, if you will? What do you outsource and what do you have in-house, and why, if I'm
Sure. And it definitely is an interesting question, not only from the question of, you know, how do you bring somebody in that can do in-house IT support so that you don't have to be paying everything to the MSP.
Mhm.
I think that's part of the challenge. The other part of the challenge is, who do you bring in that can help navigate that relationship with the MSP? to know what should be done in-house versus what should be outsourced. And that is a question that definitely I have wrestled with the company leadership. Not that we've disagreed or anything, but that's one of the things that we've had to ascertain
Yeah.
in the last 4 or 5 years. Part of my journey with that has been the prior company that I worked for. It was an accounting firm, but one of the children of one of the founders or the shareholders of the company actually started up an MSP inside the accounting firm back in the mid 90s. And so the MSP that I worked with at that accounting firm had actually grown up from within the company, and they eventually had sprung off on their own as their own company. So, but it was an interesting relationship, trying to figure out, what things are best done in-house versus what are outsourced, as I mentioned. As I came into Arm Group, one of the things that I realized is that the MSP definitely has a lot of good both tool sets as well as expertise that it would be wise for me to not try to reproduce on my own. So because I had, worked with an MSP before, I knew what some of those tool sets were. So even within the first month that I was here, I said, okay, we need to have, these certain tools to enable us to support our users remotely, for example. And yeah, I could probably go out on the market and buy those on my own, but the MSP already has them and they can already get those installed. So and then there was basically just looking to the MSP for some more advanced, for example, network engineering support that either I didn't have the time to do or I didn't necessarily have all the expertise to do. And the other thing I think that is valuable about an MSP is that they can get to know your environment really well. Because in many cases, they help to design your environment and implement your environment. And so because of that, they are more knowledgeable in terms of how to support it. And that is really helpful that you can lean on them for that understanding, especially if you're somebody who's coming into a new situation and you're having to learn all the different parts of your company infrastructure. Well, the MSP in our case had already been here for several years, and so they already had a leg up and knowing, oh, this is, we implemented this piece of software 5 years ago, and this is why we did it. This is the problem that we were trying to solve, and that was helpful to have that background. But then as I was here, first 2 or 3 years, I began to see, okay, well, this solution was appropriate back in 2014, but times have changed and it's no longer meeting the needs of our company. And so working with our MSP was really helpful. Another thing that I have found very valuable from a leadership standpoint is, and this gets more into the consulting role with an MSP, is they have been a great sounding board in terms of the IT issues that I have been dealing with, especially as the company has grown. Just as an example, we have wrestled with exactly how we store and access our data. Like a lot of companies, we were very much an on-premise organization, but yet we kept opening new offices or acquiring new companies, and it got to be more and more of a challenge to allow people to access our data effectively. And so we knew that we were going to have to make a pretty significant change in order to meet that business goal of data access and giving people the ability to work from a place that may not necessarily be on the network. And so as we did that, we had several different options of how to accomplish that goal. And rather than me trying to just flounder as to what the best option would be, sitting down with our MSP and just saying, these are the pain points. These are some of the things that we're looking at. These are the constraints that we have. And these are some of my ideas for how we're going to move forward to accomplish this goal. What do you think? And a lot of times they can give me some insight or some ideas that maybe I hadn't thought of, or sometimes they can say, you are right on track. You are definitely moving in the right direction. And a good MSP is not simply going to be all about the sale.
That's right.
They are going to say, this is a solution you need to go after. And if we're able to help you implement that solution, that's fantastic. But if not, we're happy to be, your cheerleader on the sidelines as you get that solution in place. And that has been the case on a couple of different fronts. I know when we went to a new unified communication system, we considered what the MSP was offering at that point, and we wound up not going with their solution and going a different direction. But it didn't impact our relationship in any way.
Yeah.
It was they were happy to see us find something that was a good fit for us. And so I think that kind of relationship is really important that you have with an MSP, that you see the MSP as more or less an ongoing consultant, and you utilize the expertise and the tools that they have, they can make available to you, with not necessarily having them micromanage your environment.
Yeah.
And that has been really helpful for us.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head there. So many, not so many. I like how you phrased it too. A good MSP really is your partner, and they're more a consultant, and that will get their hands dirty
Mhm.
whenever it's needed, and not when it's not. So
Right.
they're in it for what's in it for what's in your best interest, what's best for the company,
Mhm.
not that, oh, you really should go with our unified communication because it's the best. Okay. It
Mhm.
may be amazing, but it may not be what's best for your company. It may not be the best fit. And I think, there's always like 10,000 ways to skin the digital cat. And
Mhm.
it's like, for one to be there's no one best anything for everything. There's no, cure all, no panacea, no IT panacea that will just cure all your ailments. Not going to happen. You're going to find, and so it's great that you have an MSP that does that. And I think that's really good to put out there for other IT managers and people
Mhm.
coming up in IT, and even for senior management. I think those are really important ideas to understand that because we've seen so many people who've been burned by bad MSPs, and they're
Mhm.
like, we're bringing it in house, and then they're like, oh,
Yeah.
that was a disaster. Because how are you going to go from no IT expertise in house to and all of it outsourced, a bad experience, and now you're gonna hire, if you have one or two bad hires, which is possible because you don't have any IT experience. Now you got
Mhm.
bad people inside too. You're like, and then so we've had clients who've done this back and forth, and then they come to us and like, okay, thank God, this is finally a solution. And it's just that, it's just
Mhm.
about caring about the company and what's best for them, because in the end, that's what it's about,
Yeah.
providing them with those. And I think you hit on one other thing that I thought was really interesting, was like the tools. Yep, it's a quick way to kind of integrate a lot of great management tools and things. But I think the thing for growing companies is being able to get enterprise grade, security for the small business.
Mhm.
That's the thing that most excites me, and I think where the most value is on that managed security side, is
Mhm.
that now you can get the things like Sentinel-1, where you can get now at a very affordable rate. Before it was like, I think it's like 1,500 licenses you got to
Yeah.
buy. And it's like, okay, even at a few dollars, now that's a lot just for endpoint, security.
Mhm.
It's phenomenal.
Right.
It's absolutely fantastic. But now when you can just pay a few dollars for the few hundred that you need instead of 1,500,
Mhm.
so much better. Why, not wait. So things like that, I think, are really good values as well, and
Mhm.
things to consider for that growing MSP. Because I think the real benefit is when you can use those enterprise grade tools effectively. I mean, most of the time, the reason it's enterprise grade is because it's very complex and has to be fitted to the enterprise,
Right.
and it's designed specifically for that.
Mhm.
But I think Sentinel-1's a great example of this phenomenal enterprise grade, endpoint, security tool
Mhm.
that now small businesses can have to get enterprise grade security without having an enterprise level attack, vector. It's just, it's
Mhm.
massive. It's so hard. I'm just happy that we don't try to secure enterprise and government institutions, because it's so hard. I
Right.
mean, yeah, I think one of the things, and now I get all excited about this stuff, and so I go, but I think one of the challenges with security, cybersecurity, is it's this process, right?
Yeah.
It's not a state of being secure.
Mhm.
It's how do we go through the process of securing our house, if you will, to the
Right.
point where the bad guys, could they get in?
Mhm.
Sure. But it's going to be hard enough to where they go to the neighbor, not wishing ill on the
Yeah.
neighbor, but they're not going to hit you because it's too hard. The juice isn't worth the squeeze, right? Or there's not like this glaring kind of obvious, like, oh, they left the front door open.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm going to walk in and steal all their goods now, right?
Yeah, and that's been, I think, one of the more interesting things that I have observed in the time that I've been in IT, is just been that that evolution of IT security. And I will say, I'm very, again, thankful that IT security tools and processes have become much more applicable and available to businesses on the smaller scale. It used to be that those, like you said, it was only available to, if you had 1,000 or more employees and a really, really big budget. And and I think that's also, one of the things that even 10 years ago, a lot of MSPs were not really focusing a whole lot on security.
Yeah.
And then we saw the level of cyber threat just really increase exponentially over the last several years. Ransomware really wasn't a thing until 2012, 2013, 2014, and then it just skyrocketed.
Yeah.
And so we struggled for a little bit to try to figure out the best way to respond to that. And now, of course, we know that that threat is certainly not going away, but it's expanding to the point where it doesn't really matter what size your business is. It's definitely something you need to be thinking about.
Well,
Um, yeah.
Well, that's really interesting, because I think one of the challenges when it comes to security is that I think people live in a kind of, not, I don't want to say a false sense of security, but
Mhm.
like statistically, it's kind of like, what are the odds that it's going to happen to me? Like, and I
Yeah.
think a lot of times when it comes to senior management, and one of the challenges with IT is that, you know, we don't generate revenue for a
Mhm.
company. So when the company's like, hey, look, we've gone 12 years, and we haven't had a ransomware attack. We're obviously whatever we're doing now is clearly working. Potentially, yes.
Mhm.
But whatever we're doing now has worked, and the odds have been in our favor. But is that what we need to do to? And so
Yeah.
I guess what I'm getting at, do you find it challenging to communicate to senior leadership
Mhm.
about how to, the kind of the security threats that actually exist, and addressing them? Is it met with resistance of, look, we really don't want to spend money on security,
Mhm.
or, oh, if you think that's important, let's do it? I'm kind of curious, how's that work, like in your organization? How's that, kind of, not to get too personal or
No,
anything,
no, that's
I
fine.
think it's
And I would say I have also seen that evolve in terms of attitudes by company leadership in regards to security. And I will say again, I'm very thankful that the leadership at Arm Group is very cognizant of the need for cybersecurity, and is always very interested in having that conversation. One of the things that I then implemented pretty quickly after I came to Arm Group, that I had implemented my previous company, was doing some very intentional security awareness training. Because, like you said, one of the things you don't want to be is low-hanging fruit, meaning you're easy pickings for somebody who's trying to penetrate your network. And I was at a cybersecurity conference last year, and they kind of boiled it down to, um, the largest security threats are basically social engineering, um, uh, patching, and then credentials, whether that be passwords or other types of credentials. And most of the security breaches that you hear about in the news um, fall into one of those three categories, and probably 75 to 80% of the time. And so, as you look from a leadership perspective, what are our risks as a company? Which you always have to be doing from a business perspective, not just in the cyber area, but you have to say, what are things that could interrupt business as a company, and then what are we going to do about them? How are we going to mitigate those risks? And so, when you approach it from a business standpoint, it's a lot easier for a lot of the leadership to understand when they see, okay, we are one email link away from a ransomware attack, and that is our attack surface. What are we going to do to decrease the risk that we will fall victim to one of those attacks? Because as long as you're using email, you are likely to get hit with one of those types of attacks at some point. And so working to change the security culture within your company is really important, not only among your leadership, but even among the people that are sitting in front of any computer screen within your company. You have to help them to evolve or change their understanding of what cybersecurity is all about, and really help them to understand that they play a very, very important part in keeping the company secure, keeping that business running. And so we've worked very hard to make that part of our company culture. And thankfully, that has become increasingly the case in the time that I've been here. So that's a big part of helping company leadership to see this is what we're doing in order to help our company to meet its business goals, is to mitigate and minimize those risks from a cybersecurity standpoint.
That's great. And I think we, in a way, when during COVID, when ransomware became so prevalent and really became kind of front and center in the news, I think that was really helpful. It's unfortunate that it had to get to that level,
Mhm.
before it kind of got the awareness, the attention that it needed. But I do think that it's been very it's had a very positive impact. Just even though most of the stories have been large companies, and there are some people who are like, well, that's a big company. It's they're going to. That's not the case, as you should point out. It's their email blasting, and when you click on it, they don't care who you are. Now
Mhm.
given them an into your company, and
Right.
so I think that on the one hand, kind of thankful for that whole COVID time ransomware bonanza,
Yeah.
because it really did help increase awareness. And I think ultimately, just like any recession or any other bad event, when
Mhm.
you look at it the right way and you persevere through it, you come out the other end stronger and better for it. And I think the industry as a whole, I think the country as a whole is kind of on that path. And I think that's good. I think the COVID was good for us, and I think the ransomware sadly is good for us in
Mhm.
that it really helps. The big cases that have hit the news have helped people realize that, oh, it's a real threat, and it's not good.
Yeah, and I've had some experiences. Thankfully, it's not really been something that we've had to deal with within our company, not on any large basis. But we've had some companies that have been fairly close to us in terms of business relationships that have been hit.
Yeah.
And so as we think, they're, but for the grace of God go I kind of thing, where you realize that could have been us.
Right.
And so, you never want to get so self-assured that you say, well, we have all the tools in place. It's never, we're never going to go down, or we're never going to get hit. Um, as long as you have people who make mistakes, and I, myself included, you have some level of vulnerability,
Yeah.
and you just have to keep that in mind.
Yeah, and honestly, that's one of the things I really love about this whole, the idea of a SOC. We obviously we have one, but that's not why I'm bringing it up. But the having that 24/7 overview of all the accounts. So when somebody logs in at in Hershey, PA, and then
Yeah.
15 minutes later logs in Lithuania, you can be like, hey, hold. First of all, I can't go through the log. The logs are
Mhm.
crazy. There's so much data, you can't go
Yeah.
through it. But having AI looking through that and be like, hey, wait, you shouldn't, that's not possible, and then kind of flagging that and bringing that up. So I think the issue with security is that humans, as you said, as long as you have people, you're going to have human error,
Yeah.
and people, and you cannot blame somebody for being conned by a good conners. And boy, are
Mhm.
they getting good thanks
Yeah.
to AI, right? Just chat
Mhm.
GPT. It used to be, oh, if the grammar and the spelling was off, you knew it was bad. Now the grammar and the spelling are great. It looks exactly like a Microsoft email. You
Yeah.
click on it, the multi-factor authentication looks exactly right, and they're immediately logging in as you in real time without a bad guy even having to do anything. It was all just automated. You literally just log them in, and now they've got their token. They're you. Yet they're in Lithuania, and so finding that stuff, and we is really having the oversight to be like, oh, everybody's upstairs in the bedroom sleeping, but
Yeah.
the alarm didn't go off, but there's in the kitchen. Why? That can't be.
Yeah.
They got past the security. So having that, I think, is, and I'm just thankful that we now have that kind of, those tools available. Because it's funny going back to when we kind of got into IT, because we got into, I think, around the same times.
Mhm.
Um, there wasn't that sort of oversight. There was like, and of course, it was, you were always worried about viruses or servers crashing and stuff, and then recovering data. And now we have such great technology to give us the peace of mind. I used to be so stressed of just how many clients we had that we were managing their data, managing their stuff, and there was no way to oversee and be like, how do
Yeah.
I know? And like every morning when you wake up and like, oh, this didn't turn on, or that, or this
Mhm.
went down, whatever it was, the technology just wasn't there to give us that sort of peace of mind. Now I sleep like a baby. We have so many more clients, and I don't have to worry about it, because we can run backups and test those backups and make sure they're actually working and have that all automated, which, whew,
Yeah.
because back in the day you didn't have that. You're like, yeah, we've been backing up on tape every day, and then disaster strikes and you're like, crap, it
Yeah.
didn't work. Now you're sweating bullets trying to recover from this drive, and you jump through hoops, and it's so stressful. And oh, you remember those days. But now
Yeah.
everything with the cloud and the technology, it's sleeps so much better.
Yeah, yeah, and again, as someone who's been in IT for more than a minute can really appreciate the evolution of that, and I'm in the same place where a lot of people are in IT at this point, where the advent of artificial intelligence and what it's going to bring and what threats it's going to present is something that is a question that just fascinates me every day. And I think the next 5 to 10 years are going to be especially interesting in IT because there is going to be such exponential change in that way, and it does offer a great amount of productivity tools and that sort of thing. But at the same time, there's always the darker side of what what the bad guys are going to use it for, and there's some things that there's that would keep me up at night if
Yeah.
I didn't have some peace of mind by what we're currently doing. But it's something that again makes the IT field from a career standpoint just a really interesting and enjoyable place to be because that you are going to have the chance to be at the helm of some very interesting changes that are going to drastically change the business world. And so, 5 years from now, I could do an interview with you and just say, can you just be amazed at what we've seen in the last 5 years?
Yeah.
And I don't know that the pace of change has always been increasing, but it's increasing at such a rapid clip right now that it just makes my head spin sometimes. And but I'm thankful still that we have the chance to not have to do this on our own, because that's one of the things that I struggle with sometimes is that I realize that there are limitations to what I can do. But thankfully, I don't have to do everything alone. I can lean on, my fellow employees, my colleagues within the IT industry, and MSPs and things like that, that can make things really helpful for navigating these changes,
Yeah.
and that's a good thing.
Well, I think that is honestly that is the most profound note to probably wrap things up on. I think that's a lovely idea. And it's true. I mean, that just looking back on the I mean, look, I said we're going to wrap up, and now I just can't help but go off of that. I would think back to, so I started programming when I was like 12, and this was now back in what would that be, like 88.
Mhm.
And my dad designed circuit boards, for his company, and I would write the code for these, for his different projects, and I'd write these in any event. At the early days, you could be a subject matter expert on things. Like, there wasn't so much that you couldn't fully understand the computer and what was going on and write code and do things. And now we have come so far that there's just no way to be up on everything. Now computer programmers, they have to focus on one section. Are you a front end developer? Are you back end developer? And then it's what database, do you develop in,
Yeah.
or what language on the front end is and you really have to kind of specialize, because there's just so much out there, even just on that programming stuff, let alone the IT. And then here we are, sitting
Sure.
kind of at the head of IT for a company, where you've got to understand the networking, the security, the computer, this software, that software. They're using,
Yeah.
what are they? You had you listed off 12 different engineering fields at the
Yeah.
beginning. So now it's at least 12 different, softwares that you've
Yeah.
now got to be an expert on, how they're working, how they're interacting, where they're storing their data, all this stuff, keeping it safe, backing it up, not trying to stress you out or anything.
No,
But I think
no.
just relaying the reality of the situation, just keeping up with that's a lot. And yeah,
Yeah, it definitely is. And like I said, there's a temptation always there to be overwhelmed. But the reality is that the old adage, that what's the best way to eat an elephant? It's
that's right.
one bite at a time. And you can realize that you don't need to know everything. You don't need to be necessarily the subject matter expert, especially as the explosion of expertise and knowledge is just overwhelming. But it is important to have some of those, what they label as soft skills, the ability to listen, the ability to understand, to the point, the ability to make effective decisions, the ability to collaborate. Those are really important for IT leadership at this point. And what I've often told some of the other folks in company leadership and HR or recruiting is, especially as we've looked to bring on more IT staff, is that it's just as important, if not more important, for me to recognize some of those soft skills as it is for them to have the technological expertise in whatever area that we're hiring them for. Because I can teach somebody how to code, or I could teach somebody how to manage a Microsoft Entra environment or that sort of thing, or they could take a class and learn some things. But what I can't teach is empathy. I can't teach somebody to know how to communicate effectively with an end user, regardless of his or her skill level.
Right.
And so, I think it's important, just as important from a leadership perspective, to encourage those kinds of characteristics within the IT staff, because the technology is always going to change, but people are pretty much the same from decade to decade. And so it's really important to work with people effectively in the midst of this technology.
Yep. That's Very well said. And
Yeah.
we say it all the time. I like to say that we're, on the IT side, we're therapists first and technicians second, right? Somebody's having a problem, you need to understand their problem and make them feel at ease and then solve their problem.
Mhm.
And you're right. You can teach the technical skills, but you can't teach people skills so easily. I mean, that's a really tough one to do. But before we go, I did have to ask about the Thor's hammer back there. Is
Okay.
that
Well, like, it's like a lot of folks in IT. I'm very much a geek, and so my wife and my kids make sure that I keep up on whatever the latest is of the Marvel Avengers series, or whether it be Star Wars or Star Trek or what have you. So there's always a little bit of that nerdiness going on within the IT realm. So I make no apologies for it, but thankfully I'm not alone.
No, you are not.
So,
You're good company.
yeah.
That's awesome. Well, Chris, I can't thank you enough for coming on. But before we go, can you tell everybody where they can find out more about you and the ARM Group?
Sure. Well, our website is fairly easy to remember. It's just armgroup.net. And again, mid-size engineering firm in the Mid-Atlantic area. And even though we're in the Mid-Atlantic area, we actually we do work throughout the country. Matter of fact, one of our part of our company is Arm Camco, and they actually had some engineers or some technicians that were doing some generator repair on some cruise ships in the South Pacific or
Wow.
Southeast Asia. So we do have our folks go far and wide sometimes when the job calls for it. So, but our goal as a company is to basically make this world a better place than what we found it. And when we can do that, we think we've done our job well. So I try to do that from an IT perspective.
I love that. Well, Chris, thanks so much for coming on the show. It was just a pleasure having you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Cyber Business Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.